There's something happening right now, not in this video, not in these words, in the space between them. Most people never notice it, not because it's hidden, but because they're moving too fast to feel it. We fill every gap, every commute, every waiting room, every quiet moment before sleep. We fill it with music, with podcasts, with the endless scroll, anything, everything, as long as it isn't this. Have you ever asked yourself why? Not why you reach for your phone. That's the surface. The real question is, what are you afraid you'll find if you don't? Here's something nobody tells you about silence. It isn't peaceful, not at first. The first time you actually stop, really stop, what you meet isn't calm. It's noise, the noise that was always there, underneath everything else, the loop of thoughts that never gets resolution, the feeling you've been outrunning without realizing it. The psychologist Blaise Pascal wrote in the 1600s that all of humanity's problems stem from the inability to sit quietly in a room alone. People have been laughing at that line for centuries, but I don't think it's funny. I think it's the most honest thing anyone's ever said about the human condition, because silence doesn't create discomfort, it reveals it. Think about what we reach for. The moment the conversation ends, the phone appears. The moment the drive starts, the podcast plays. The moment the house goes quiet, the TV comes on. We have built an entire civilization of noise, and we call it connection, entertainment, productivity, and sometimes it is those things. But sometimes, if we're honest, it's escape. Escape from what? From yourself. That might sound dramatic, but track it for one day. Notice the moment you feel the pull to reach for something external. Notice what's present in that moment just before you do. Is it boredom, restlessness, a vague unease you can't quite name? That unease is information. It's not a malfunction. It's an invitation you keep declining. The spiritual traditions all point here, even if they use different words. The Buddhist concept of dukkha, usually translated as suffering, is more accurately described as this low-grade, persistent sense that something is slightly off, that you are slightly off, that no amount of achievement, connection, or distraction will quite scratch the itch. And they agree on something else. The cure isn't to fix the itch, it's to turn toward it. I want to share something with you, not as a teacher, not as someone who has this figured out, as a witness to a process I don't fully understand and have stopped needing to. For the last 7 or 8 years, something has been happening in the quiet. It didn't start as a practice. There was no teacher, no technique, no intention to meditate or achieve anything, just a pull towards stillness, closing my eyes, not to escape the world, but to feel something underneath it. Something that doesn't move when everything else is moving. And in that stillness, things started shifting. Not because I forced them, not because I decided to change, but the way a file downloads when you give it a stable connection. Something was installing itself, quietly, without asking my permission. The need for other people's approval, it loosened, not all at once, not because I worked on it. It just became less interesting, less urgent. Habits that had been with me for years, they fell away, one by one, as if the body was being quietly reorganized towards something it already knew. Relationships shifted, not in a way that created distance, but in a way that created something rarer, presence without need, to love without grasping, to be with people fully, without depending on them to make you feel whole. I'm not telling you this because it's my story, I'm telling you because it isn't. This is what silence does. This is what has always been reported, across traditions, across centuries, across cultures, not as philosophy, as lived experience, as testimony. Ramana Maharshi, one of the great sages of modern India, rarely gave teachings in words. He sat in silence. People came from across the world to sit near him and left transformed. When asked how this was possible, he said, "Silence is ever speaking. It is the perennial flow of language." The Sufi mystics spoke of fana, the dissolution of the constructed self in the presence of something vaster, not annihilation, clarification, the noise falling away until what remains is unmistakably real. In Advaita Vedanta, the tradition that gave us the teaching that the individual self and the universal consciousness are not two separate things, the practice isn't effort, it's recognition. Stopping the motion long enough to recognize what was never moving. The psalmist wrote it simply: be still and know. 2 instructions, in that order. The stillness comes first. Here's what I've come to understand. We are not afraid of silence. We are afraid of what we'll meet there. The unlived grief, the question we've been avoiding, the voice that knows, the one we keep drowning out, that something in our life is asking to change, or the even more unsettling possibility that the self we've been protecting, defending, building might not be as solid as we thought. But here's the thing about that encounter. It isn't destructive, it's clarifying. What you meet in silence isn't the worst of you, it's the truth of you. And the truth, however uncomfortable at first, is always lighter than the story we've been carrying to avoid it. I'm not going to give you a 5-step program for this, not because there isn't wisdom in structure, there is, but because what I'm pointing to precedes technique. It doesn't need a method, it needs permission to stop. Not forever, not dramatically, just the next time you reach for your phone in a quiet moment, pause. Don't fight the impulse, just notice it. Feel what's underneath it, the texture of the discomfort, the quality of the restlessness. Get curious about it instead of rushing past it. You don't have to call it meditation, you don't have to call it anything. You don't need a cushion, a tradition, a teacher, an app. You need nothing except the willingness to stay for one moment longer than you normally would. Because here's what happens when you do. The silence stops being an absence. It becomes a presence, not threatening, not empty, full, more full than most of what we usually fill it with. And something begins, or continues, or deepens. A process that isn't yours to control, only yours to allow. Some people call it awakening, some call it healing, some call it growing up, some call it coming home. I've stopped needing to name it. I just know that the more I give it space, the more it gives back. Not in the ways I would have asked for, in better ways, in ways I didn't know to ask for. There is something in you right now, underneath all the thinking, all the planning, all the remembering and anticipating, that is completely still. It has never been disturbed, not by your failures, not by your losses, not by the worst days you've ever lived through, not by any of it. Silence isn't the absence of noise, it's the presence of that. And the only reason you haven't found it yet, or haven't stayed long enough to recognize it, isn't because it's far away. It's because you keep leaving. Stop leaving. This is the first video in the silence series, 4 explorations of what silence actually is, what it does, and what becomes possible when you stop running from it. If something in this landed for you, I'd genuinely love to know. Not as feedback, as a conversation. Drop it in the comments below. And if you know someone who's been feeling the pull towards stillness, or someone who's been running from it, maybe send it their way. Sometimes the right words find people at the right time. I'll see you in the silence.